everyone, it's Nina and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we are going to be doing a video I've wanted to film for a long time, and that is this video ends when I find a 5-star book / 5-star predictions reading vlog. Basically, the books we are going to be reading in this video are all ones I think have the potential of being 5 stars. They all contain elements in them that I think I will really like, and if they're done well, will probably become a new favorite for me. We have 4 books that I have on the list to potentially read for this video. So with that intro out of the way, let's get right on into it. The first book I wanted to mention is The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. McLean. I honestly did not have this on my radar until it became revealed to be the July Illumicrate pick. And since then I was like, okay, yeah, sounds cute. But honestly, what really got me to be interested in this book was how it was described on the story graph. It says that The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. McLean is the perfect fit for readers who adore cozy fantasy, LGBTQIA romance, and magical adventures, and are drawn to stories that feature themes of conservation, disability representation, and overcoming anxiety with a dash of whimsy and a whole lot of heart. That is just a great laundry list of a lot of things I really like in books. I also feel like me and my wife have been really into zoos lately, and this book takes place at a magical zoo and follows a zookeeper who is taking care of an endangered species of phoenix, and then her kind of academic / work rivals to lovers with a fellow zookeeper who takes care of griffins. Overall, it just sounds really cute, and I'm super excited to check this one out. I actually got an e-arc of this book that I'm going to be reading for this vlog. Thank you so much to Orbit Books and NetGalley for providing me with an arc for review purposes. Speaking of another arc that I got that I am so incredibly excited about that we're also going to be reading in this video, that is Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright. I am so incredibly excited for this, literally so much so that I am renewing my Illumicrate subscription to get this in August. This is an adult fantasy with a poly main trio that focuses on a magical serial killer and blood magic. I think there's also some vampires thrown in there too. Really just giving me a list of everything I want in a book. Next book I wanted to talk about is a little bit more of a controversial one, and that is Shanghai Immortal by A.Y. Chow. Honestly, considered also putting on this list of a vlog where I read books that are the lowest rated ones on my TBR. Because this book has a 3.39 on Goodreads, which is quite low. However, I think the reason people hate this book is because they find the writing to be really cringy, and I, for one, don't care. I actually kind of love it when there's a really quirky writing style, because I feel like it really helps make the characters have a more distinct voice and personality. I also know that the main romance of this book is with this soft boy, mild-mannered banker guy in a suit, which, if you know anything about me, is so insanely my bread and butter. And the last book I have to add to this TBR is The Age of Magical Overthinking by Amanda Montell. I have given every single one of Amanda Montell's books I've read so far 5 stars. I think she is an amazing writer and able to blend just so many different topics into her books very seamlessly, with just the right level of personal anecdote and facts to make the book informative and have a lot of heart behind it. This book is a book that primarily focuses on the sociology of the different irrational things we believe, regardless of the actual truth to them, and sort of the different psychological concepts that go behind that. This book my wife already read and really enjoyed, so I'm super excited to check this one out very soon. So this is a look at the TBR for this video. I think the 2 books I'm going to be starting off for this vlog are The Phoenix Keeper, and then I'll get into The Age of Magical Overthinking, because I think the library hold for this one is going to come up pretty soon. So I'll come back to you in the next couple days with my first update. Okay, so I wanted to give my first update for this vlog because I have now made it actually halfway through The Phoenix Keeper. I'll give a brief summary of what this book is about, and then I'll talk about my thoughts on it. So this is an adult cozy fantasy that follows our main character Isla, who is a zookeeper that's trying to secure a mate for her beloved endangered phoenix Ruba. And the story is told alongside a kind of slow burn rivals to lovers she has with another zookeeper who is this very charismatic, outgoing person who is a griffin keeper. I'll start with all of the positives I find for this book. The first big thing is the fact that as a like big zoo enjoyer myself, I really like all the aspects setting up like the zoo for magical creatures and like all of the inventiveness that went into like what their theoretical care would be. I feel like all of those elements really like sell the story and the world, making it very like immersive and fun. I really like seeing like all of the scenes with those magical creatures. And there's also been like a more action / mystery focused side plot of these poachers that had stolen some other phoenix eggs, and that has become like more of a challenge for Isla in setting up her female phoenix with the new male phoenix that's entering their zoo. One thing that is a little bit confusing is that this book is basically set in our version of modern day, but at the same time it's also like a complete fantasy world with like fake countries. And I kind of don't really know if that element needed to be added in. I feel like it could have worked just as well, if not a little bit better, if it just was our world, but then there were magical creatures there. Because in the beginning, it gets a little confusing trying to figure out all of the different, like, fake country names and, like, where everyone is from. When it seems like the world and the place where the zoo is located in, from elements of its weather and its, like, architectural history, that's supposed to be a play on, like, southwestern America. So I don't know why they made the choice to not actually set it there and instead make it this new imaginary country. I feel like it would have been a little bit more easy to understand if it was just set in our world. But that's just kind of like a minor problem to the book. The big problem with this book, and probably the thing that's making me dislike it quite a lot, is the fact that the main character, Isla, might be one of the most insufferable characters I've ever had to follow. And I feel like on paper, me and her are quite similar, since we're both queer women with anxiety and zero talking skills. So I say this all coming from a place of somewhat understanding where she's coming from, but I feel like I get so much second-hand embarrassment from most of her interactions with just how negative and hostile she is. Like, it's one thing for the fact that she, like, doesn't like talking to the patrons of the zoo, and she really just wants to focus on the phoenixes. But pretty much every interaction she has with the zoo patrons is her either both in internal dialogue and outwardly talking to the patrons, like, just, like, really belittling them and thinking they're absolute idiots. And it just makes her come across as so mean, really unnecessarily so. It also really feels like she just like pushed off any other human interaction and put all of her focus onto her one singular friend, who is Tanya, who is another fellow keeper of the bird exhibit at the zoo. And it feels like she constantly is doing like huge like emotional info dumps of her feelings to Tanya. And if these were like real life people that I knew, I would tell Tanya that she like needs to get a better friend, because it really feels like she's doing all the heavy lifting for Isla's like emotional development, and Isla is not doing nearly enough in return. Her romance with Luciana, the Griffin zookeeper, is also so infuriating, and I honestly could not believe it in the slightest. At the point I'm at right now, like a little over halfway, they are starting to get a little bit on better footing with each other, but the majority of the beginning was them like barely being in scenes with each other and just having a lot of like cold cruelty for the first half of the book. I feel like it could have easily been saved if they had to work together a little bit earlier on, or if it just had like more enjoyable banter. But from the place that it seems like Isla's coming from, she just really dislikes Luciana for seemingly no reason. Like, maybe Luciana was a little bit mean to her back when they were in college together, but that is established to be like 8 years prior to the story, and she's just like held this grudge against her for so long for no reason. It just comes across that Isla is really emotionally immature, and that she's just really jealous of Luciana for being able to be so easily interacting with other people. And Isla just like really doesn't take other people's emotions into consideration. She just kind of like has snap judgments of how she thinks about people and then continues to run with that for the rest of their interactions. And I just feel like so far the book hasn't really pointed out a lot of Isla's flaws. It seems like it's much more like, it's okay, you'll be able to learn to talk to people, it's not going to be that difficult, as opposed to making a claim that she is a toxic person. I think there probably will be more interactions with her and Luciana later on, since Isla has realized that Luciana was not being mean to her on purpose back in their college days. But I feel like there needs to be a lot of development that Isla has to go through in the second half of the book to make her personality in the first half of the book justifiable from a like storytelling perspective. So yes, I'm kind of disappointed in this book. This might end up being a recurring theme for the other books on this list, where I really like a lot of the concepts on paper, but kind of like unforeseen things that are not really part of the original summary will really turn me off from the book. Like, obviously, I knew that Isla going into the book was going to prefer working with animals than people, and that she was going to have this, like, rivals to lovers relationship with another zookeeper. But I didn't realize it was going to come across as her having such a, like, harsh and mean personality. And that kind of like unforeseen element of the story is really what's making me dislike it. So I don't think there's probably any way that this book could be salvaged and become a 5-star. If anything, from just like the first like 40%, I was considering doing like a 2.5 stars, even almost going as far to DNF this. But I have heard that the last third of the book definitely picks up and is better than the rest of it. So I have high hopes that the last section will definitely save it for me, and maybe it'll end up being closer to like a 3-star. So those are my feelings so far on The Phoenix Keeper. I also started another book this morning, and that is The Age of Magical Overthinking by Amanda Montell. This is a nonfiction book that's kind of sociology/psychology, mixed in with a little bit of like memoir as well. It focuses on like ideas of rationality that have developed in modern society, and kind of different beliefs that people have that aren't based in logic, but are sort of lies that we tell ourselves to make the world seem a little bit more understandable. From the introduction, you can kind of see where Amanda Montell like first had the desire to write this book. And I think it's a very like understandable one that probably a lot of other people were facing. Just the like intense information overload that has come with the internet age, as well as a lot of the like pain and uncertainty that sprung up around the COVID pandemic. This book so far has been really interesting. I'm currently only like 50 pages in, and I'm about to start chapter 3. I don't think I mentioned this in this vlog, but I actually got my copy signed because we went to go see her do this like live show / book tour. And the first chapter of this book is basically what she presented on during that live show. So I knew a lot of the content of that one going into it, but even from there, I've really been enjoying the topic of the second chapter, and I think I will enjoy the rest of this book quite a bit as well. This book is actually quite short. It's just a little over 200 pages, and then there's like a good section back here of all of like her citations. And I don't know if you can see very well, but I do have quite a few tabs in this section already that I've read. So far, I'm really enjoying this. I'm planning on reading more of this physically today, and then probably for the rest of the week, I might switch over to the audiobook when I get to a good stopping point. So that is my reading update first right now, and I will come back to you guys in a couple days when I have another update. Thought I'd get a little crazy and hold my mic for once because I don't usually do that in videos. So hopefully this audio will not turn out bad when I'm like doing all of the post-production stuff. Anyway, I have 2 major updates for you. The first one is that I have now finished The Phoenix Keeper, and I've made a lot of progress in The Age of Magical Overthinking. Let's start off by talking about The Phoenix Keeper. I think I'm going to give this 2.5 stars. In the end, I just didn't really enjoy it. I do think the last third of the book was definitely the best part, definitely the most action-packed and focused on like the subplot that I was really interested in that kind of had been teased early on in the book. And I feel like that inclusion helped made there be a little bit more going on in the story. However, I think overall, like I said before, my major critique was just the unlikability of the main character. And I feel like the initial setup of me reading it and just not really connecting and liking their character kind of made the ending section a little too late in terms of getting me to actually like care about the story and connect with the characters anymore. I will have already talked about this book a little bit because I am going to have this vlog come out after my June wrap up. And as I said in that one, I don't have a problem with unlikable main characters in principle, but I feel like they have to be done in a very specific way for me to understand where the character is coming from, or at the very least see them go on some type of emotional journey and learn something by the end of the story. And I feel like in this one, it did happen in some instances, but definitely not to the extent that I felt was warranted considering the place that they started at in the beginning of the book. And I feel like at the very least, they were incredibly harsh and judgmental to their romantic interest, to the point where I really just could not believe that their love interest would get over all of the things that they thought about them. So that element of the story just like really fell flat for me. Like I said, I'm giving it a 2.5, but I'm probably going to round it up to 3 stars on NetGalley because I feel like it's a little bit of a disservice to rate a book lower than you actually feel about it. But overall, I kind of am done thinking about this book and talking about it. I can't understand people that like talking about things they dislike and going on long rants in videos. I feel like for me, when there's something negative in my life, I just want it to like get away from me as quickly as possible. So let's stop talking about that and now move on to the other book I've been reading, which is The Age of Magical Overthinking by Amanda Montell. I am very close to being done with this book. It looks a lot more deceptively long than it actually is because the majority of the end section of this book is all of like these citations, as well as like an index of all the topics that she talks about. I also have done a lot of annotations, as you guys can see. And so far, I am quite enjoying this book. I think in the end, unless things really change in the last like chapter I have left, it's probably going to end up being a 4.5 stars. And my main reason for that is I feel like this book is kind of like 9/10 of a full book. Originally, I was thinking more of as like 3/4 of a book, but I feel like that's a little too harsh. It just feels like with all of the topics that are chosen in this book, while they are very interesting and well researched, and I have had quite a few epiphanies in like some of the stuff that Amanda Montell says, it does feel like all the chapters end a little bit too abruptly. Like there could have been at least like 2 or 3 more pages of either like different examples or like further thinking to do on all of the topics. That also coupled with the fact this book is relatively short before all of those like citations and extra sections in the end. The actual like content of the book is only 220 pages long. So I feel like all of those things just make me feel like that just makes it feel like this book is not diving as deeply or as thoroughly as she did in the other topics for her other 2 books. So that's kind of where my head is at right now. I think this probably is a good primer for all of the topics that she's focused on. And like I said, there's a lot of parts that I have annotated where her writing is really beautiful. She just like really hits the nail on the head with some of the analogies she gives. And some of her personal anecdotes definitely resonate very strongly with me. But I feel like at least on the like intellectual knowledge-seeking side of what a nonfiction is supposed to be about, it's just slightly below the experience I had when reading her other 2 books. So that's my reading update for right now. Like I said, I only have like 1 chapter left of this. So I think I'm going to finish that probably later tonight. And then I have to decide what the next book I'm going to read for this vlog will be. So I'll come back to you very soon when I have my next update. Okay, I've now made some progress on the next 2 books I'm going to be reading for this vlog, so I thought I would do an update now about my thoughts on them. The first one I have to talk about is Shanghai Immortal by A.Y. Chow. I am currently, I think, around like 40% of the way through this book, and I think I'll start off by giving a brief summary of what this book is about. So this follows our female main character, Lady Qing, who is a half like celestial fox deity, half vampire. And because vampires are more on the like demon side of immortals, she is considered a mistake and an outcast. She is the ward and kind of like the indentured servant of the King of Hell, who is Big Wong. And the premise of the book is kind of twofold. One aspect is the fact that Big Wong wants to set up a bank in Hell, and he recruits a human named Tony Lee to come to Hell to work with him on that, and Lady Qing basically gets tasked with being his babysitter while he's in Hell. There's also a plot line where Lady Qing's childhood bully, Lady Su, is trying to steal this all-powerful dragon pearl from Big Wong, and Qing is trying to convince Big Wong to let her help him in protecting it. This book has a surprisingly low average rating on Goodreads. I think last time I checked, it was at like a 3.39, so it's definitely one of the lowest rated books on my TBR. And I feel like that really stems from the fact that this book really will ride or die based on Lady Qing's personality development, because she's very mean and quick to judge in the beginning of the book, and in canon has a lot of like anger management issues that she's getting like coached on and basically in therapy for. So I can see a lot of people really disliking her in the beginning of the book and then deciding to DNF or giving it a low rating based on that initial experience. I think a lot of her issues kind of stem from this, like, if you've been beaten down so many times, you start seeing threats everywhere. So I feel like her journey in the story is really about her learning to not be so closed off and to see everyone as out to get her. I think because of her like dual status as both this like celestial deity and a vampire, she feels she is a mistake and incapable of being loved. So she puts up this like wall of hostility to keep people away from hurting her. We've only got kind of like small moments of it in the book so far, but I feel like that is really where the book could shine in her development of a romance with Tony Lee. He's a little bit different from what I had initially expected, but at the same time is giving a lot of what I really like in this type of character. Him being this like very generic, mild-mannered suit-wearing banker who's like kind of easily shocked and scared by all of the like crazy situations that Lady Jing is putting him through. But at the same time, she kind of like always feels a pang of guilt when she is letting him down, which is the first time it seems that she's really felt that way about someone else. Antony being kind of like an outsider coming in to this world of hell, not having a lot of the like preconceived notions or knowing a lot of the gossip about Lady Jing, allows him to kind of like form his own opinions of her and maybe get more to like the root of what her personality is versus like the person she's projecting out. So I'm really excited to see where that development of the book goes, because I think we really are about to get into a section of the book that is going to be a lot of that like forced proximity, having to spend more time together, that I think will eventually lead to a lot of revelations for the two of them. I'm also combo reading this as an audiobook along with this physical book, and I have to say I don't really like the audiobook. The narrator is doing all the characters with a British accent and is trying to do very different voices for everyone, but with some of them it's very much like, "Oi, governor," which honestly kind of makes it a little hard to understand some of the characters. At the same time, though, I do appreciate that she is pronouncing all of the Chinese words, because honestly, I'm very bad at a lot of Chinese pronunciation, particularly when it's like written down. So I feel like having that at least like helps me get into the flow with how the words are supposed to sound. But I do think in the end, this is probably going to be more of a like reading book over a listening book for me. Okay, now let's talk about the other book I have been reading, which is Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright. This I have been reading as an e-arc. Thank you so much to Aura Books and NetGalley for providing me with an e-arc for review purposes. I'm about a third of the way through this book, so let me also talk about the overarching setup for this book. This is an adult, kind of like romantasy, that is dual perspective of these two different characters. One character is Shan, who is this young noblewoman who at the very start of the book, I think this is also in the summary, but she ends up killing her father and taking over his place as the new head of the family, because she has this like big overarching scheme that she is running to overthrow the king of their country. Shan is also something called a blood worker, which is basically a person who is able to do blood magic. And the world building is very unique and interesting in that the country they live in is one of the only places that allows this type of blood magic. And this king is essentially a vampire who is thousands of years old because he is the only one who is permitted to use the blood magic to stay young. The other POV character is this guy named Samuel, who at the start of the story is someone that doesn't have blood magic, but instead has this other strange, like unknown power that allows him to be able to compel people to do whatever he commands them to do. And Shan sort of like picks him out and decides that she's going to use him for this big overarching plot and scheme that she has. And this is also a polyamorous romance, so even though those two are the two main POV characters, there is a third character named Isaac, who is kind of like a childhood friend, somewhat ex of Shan, who is now working as like the royal blood worker assistant to the king. And he kind of has like romantic ties to both Shan and Samuel. Like I said, I'm now a third of the way through this book. One of my main positives is that I was very intrigued with the world building. I like the idea of the blood magic being something that only their country does, and it's kind of like seen as taboo. So basically anytime someone outside of their country has blood magic, they will kind of like immigrate in to avoid being persecuted. The idea of this like eternal king who's thousands of years old, who's figured out the secret to eternal life, but then is keeping it all to himself, making it illegal for any other blood worker to use the same magic as him. And there's also the element that all of the blood workers wear these like big claws that you see on the cover art that are both like kind of practical as a way to like cut into someone to use blood magic, but are also very ornamental and like a status symbol of this blood working class. However, I feel like overall this book is okay. I feel like I'm just not a huge fan of any of the main characters in the throuple so far. Shan feels a little bit similar to Kaz Brekker in that it feels like she's written to seem way smarter and cooler than she actually is. Like, it says very early on that she doesn't anticipate her twin brother being upset at the fact that she killed her dad, which is such an obvious reaction that someone would have. It feels like we are supposed to see her as having this like big grand master plan, but all of the details are very confusing. I feel like Samuel is a more relatable and understandable character and is really just trying to do the right thing despite against all the hard times he's up against. I feel like the setup of the trio, like kind of all having their own agenda and then kind of being played against each other despite their attraction for each other is interesting. But I do feel like it kind of comes out of nowhere. I really don't feel like Shan and Samuel have any chemistry. Shan and Isaac might have some chemistry, but we don't really know like how Shan got hurt by Isaac, so it's a little hard to root for them without kind of knowing how bad he was when he initially hurt her. It kind of just seems like he really just ditched her when he had the chance to get more power. I feel like another thing is that the dialogue is a little basic and not really doing what it needs to do in order to sell me on their attraction. At the part I left off on, we are starting to get into the other like big major plot line, which is the fact that there is this like mysterious serial killer who is specifically killing off the unbloodied, who are basically people that can't do blood magic and are sort of treated as like second-class citizens in this country. And Sean and Samuel are under a like special order from the king to do research into figuring out who this person is. I'm interested in seeing how this plot will eventually develop, as well as just seeing like overall what's going to happen with the like development of the romance between the three characters. So yes, that is my reading update for so far. So I will come back to you probably tomorrow when I have another update. Okay, so it's been about like a week and a half since I've last talked to you. I'm also holding the mic again, and I think I'm also wearing the same dress I was wearing in one of my other updates. And I'm holding the mic because my wife is using the sewing machine in the other room, and I feel like there's gonna be a lot of background noise unless I hold this closer to my face. Anyway, I think I'm going to do my final update for this vlog because I have now finished the other two books I was talking about. Let's start off by talking about my thoughts on Mistress of Lies. In the end, I didn't really like this book that much, and honestly, I'm kind of depressed over it. I just feel like, how could a book that I was looking forward to so much let me down? I think the major problem comes from the actual like writing style, in that this book is very tell, don't show. I feel like we're told a lot of things about the characters, but that so much of what shaped them into who they are is stuff that happens in the past. And I feel like a lot of the stuff we actually see them do in the story is very like counteractive to what we're told about their backstory, or it doesn't really make sense. And the backstory stuff doesn't really feel like it has that much actual like practiced relevance to their present situations. And I feel like that all leads to the stuff the character's doing never feeling fully justified, except as a way to move the plot forward. And I feel like with the very end of the book, I was just like shaking my head thinking, this is so bad and boring and really underwhelming. There are a lot of things that I talked about earlier on that I did like about the book. I like a lot of the concepts of this book, and I liked the overall world building aspects. I think my final rating for this book is going to be 3 stars, but I don't think I'm going to be continuing on with the second book in the series, but I probably will still end up getting the Illumicrate special edition for this one, just because I'm trying to like use up the rest of my credits from my Illumicrate subscription anyway, and I'll decide if I want to like keep this book in the long run after I get that edition. Now let's move on to talking about Shanghai Immortal. I was actually really pleasantly surprised with the second half of this book, and I ended up really liking it. There's an entire like center section, which is basically like the team building area of Qing and Tony Lee like having to spend a lot of time together. And as part of that, they kind of are going on these like double dates with this girl that Qing has like spent most of her life kind of being like frenemies with, as well as her boyfriend. And it was like really cute. I really liked all of the like friendship bonding elements. And I thought the romantic development was exactly what I had expected and really hoped for. The only problem I do have with this book is, like I said before, I feel like the beginning section was a little rough as I was getting used to Lady Qing's character. And I do think that maybe the last like 4 chapters of the book, where like the main climax happens, maybe is a little rushed. Or at the very least, the very last chapter, it felt like we were getting so many revelations and like dealing with all of the consequences of the main plot very quickly that the last chapter I feel like could have easily been extended to be a little bit longer to give us a little bit more breathing room to kind of like settle into all of the things that we learned. But overall, I really did enjoy this book. I think I'm going to give it 4 stars. Since I did really enjoy the like center section of the book, I was considering 4.5, but I think the ending being a little too quick is what made me push it down a little bit. But I do have high hopes for the rest of the series because I do think the second book is going to focus on like the core friendship squad again, and I'm very excited to see what that book is like. Also, I have been reading from a library copy for this video, but I do know that Fairy Loot did a special edition of this book that because this book has kind of a low rating is relatively affordable, so I think I might end up getting that special edition on Pango in the future. Okay, so now that we're at the end of this video, we can talk a little bit more about like the 4 books that I read and sort of what my goal was going into this video and what I feel like I've learned now that I've read a bunch of my 5-star predictions. In the end, I feel like this has just taught me that I have no idea what my tastes actually are. I feel like half the time I'm like, I think I know what I like, and then the other half I have no idea and the book ends up being a flop. And this might sound kind of backwards, but I think I like it when books like surprise me with a reveal or revelation of something I didn't really go into the book expecting to find. Or maybe that I only had a vague idea of what the book was about, and the element that had originally drawn me into the book ends up being done in a way that really like hits hard for me. I feel like that is a good case with Shanghai Immortal. Like, I did know that one of the main plot points in Lady Jing's overall character development would be focused on her like growth with her self-esteem, as I had seen that mentioned in a couple different reviews, but I had no idea how much I would actually like it, or that it would also include this added element of female friendship that I really enjoyed when I ended up reading that part. So I feel like I ended up loving it a lot more because of that. I think something else I've also learned is that I am very hit or miss when it comes to reading authors that I've not read from before. I don't actually tend to read a lot of repeat authors unless they're books that are part of like a series I've already started. But in this video, I read 3 books, I think all from debut authors, and only one of them I ended up giving above like a 3.5 stars. Whereas authors that I have read from before in the past, if I know that I like their books, I at least have like some semblance of like what their writing style is going to be like. And that familiarity with their writing style, I think helps me like get into the groove of the books a lot faster, so I'm able to enjoy them a lot more, which definitely was the case when reading the most recent Amanda Montell book. But I think it also boils down to what I talked about before, in that the summary of a book or the tropes that are listed in the book is not really enough to be like fully indicative of what the book is going to be like, because those tropes are very much up to author interpretation in terms of how they're going to be implemented into the story. And the way that the authors might choose to do it don't always 100% align with how I would like to see a trope play out. So I think that's why I like the more like surprise element be added in, because I feel like it helps add another layer that I wasn't expecting. So even if the trope that I initially had gone into the book hoping for ends up not really meeting my standards, I might still have something else in the book to look forward to that will keep me engaged and wanting to read more of the book. Anyway, with that long ending ramble out of the way, we are now at the end of this video. We did not find any 5 stars in this video, but that's totally fine. I'm glad I knocked off quite a few books that were on my TBR. If you guys like this video, consider liking, commenting, or subscribing if you aren't already. Consider following me on the Storygraph if you'd like to see my reading updates in real time, and following me on my Bookstagram, which is also linked in the description. And that is going to be it from me today. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!